The train pulled away in a cloud of gray dust, leaving Evelyn Cross standing alone beside a weathered wooden platform with nothing but a faded duffel bag, a canvas backpack, and a determination she hadn't possessed a month earlier. The station was little more than a shelter with a crooked roof, surrounded by endless fields of wild grass that danced beneath the afternoon breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled lazily over the rolling hills. She adjusted the brim of her worn sun hat and looked toward the gravel road where an aging pickup truck waited. The driver leaned against the door, arms folded, studying her with open curiosity. "You sure you're the one who bought Hollow Creek Farm?" he asked after a long silence. "I am." He scratched his beard, almost smiling. "Most folks won't even drive past that place after dark." Evelyn simply nodded. People had spent weeks telling her everything that was wrong with her decision. They said she knew nothing about farming. They reminded her she'd lived in cities her entire life. They whispered that heartbreak had clouded her judgment. None of them understood. Pain had stripped away every illusion she once depended on. Once everything familiar disappeared, fear no longer had much power. The truck rattled along a winding dirt road bordered by towering oak trees, whose branches intertwined overhead like the ceiling of an ancient cathedral. Sunlight spilled through scattered leaves, painting shifting patterns across the road. After nearly 40 minutes, the driver slowed. There, beyond a rusted iron gate, stood 200 neglected acres. The farmhouse leaned slightly to one side, its white paint faded to dull gray. Several porch rails had collapsed. Ivy climbed the chimney unchecked, and broken shutters swung gently in the breeze. Tall grass covered what had once been gardens, swallowing stone walkways beneath years of neglect. But something else caught Evelyn's attention. Near an old red barn stood a black horse with a silver blaze running down its face. The stallion watched her without moving, ears forward, completely silent. Unlike frightened animals, it didn't step back, it simply waited. The driver noticed. "That's Midnight. You know him? Everybody around here does." "What about his owner?" The old man removed his cap. "Samuel Reed." The name lingered in the air. Samuel had owned Hollow Creek Farm for nearly 50 years. He had never married, never had children, and rarely traveled farther than the county line. Neighbors described him as stubborn, honest, and happiest while repairing fences or tending orchards. When he died the previous winter, distant relatives arrived from another state. Within 2 days, they sold the tractors, auctioned the equipment, emptied the house of anything valuable, and disappeared. The livestock had been scattered among nearby farms. Everything except Midnight. No one wanted him? Evelyn asked. The driver shrugged. "He's old. Arthritis in one leg. Too expensive to keep. Folks figured he'd be gone soon enough." Midnight lowered his head toward the dry grass but never stopped watching her. Something tightened inside Evelyn's chest. She knew that feeling. Only 6 weeks earlier, she had stood in a downtown office signing divorce papers that ended 14 years of marriage. Daniel Cross had always been admired by everyone outside their home. He was polished, confident, generous with strangers, and impossible to disappoint in. Public-private life had been different. Every dream Evelyn mentioned became unrealistic. Every accomplishment became luck. Every opinion became something to correct. The criticism hadn't begun loudly. It arrived in tiny pieces over the years until silence seemed easier than disagreement. She had almost forgotten who she was before marrying him. Then came the charity gala. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom when Daniel introduced a younger woman as the person I'll be building my future with. He spoke calmly, almost proudly, as though announcing a business partnership. The room became painfully quiet. Evelyn remembered dozens of faces turning toward her. No one knew where to look. She smiled once, not because she felt strong, but because refusing to collapse was the only decision left to make. She walked out before anyone offered sympathy. 3 weeks later, the settlement was finalized. The money wasn't enough to replace the years she had invested in someone else's ambitions, but it was enough to buy one forgotten property that no bank believed had value. When she found Hollow Creek Farm listed in an estate notice, something inside her settled. She couldn't explain why. Perhaps broken places recognize broken people, or perhaps they simply offer each other another chance. The truck came to a stop before the rusted gate. The driver unloaded her bags. "You still have time to change your mind." Evelyn looked across the abandoned fields, stretching toward distant blue hills. Grass bent gently beneath the wind. The farmhouse stood, wounded but standing. The horse waited beside the barn as though expecting someone who had taken far too long to arrive. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the heavy iron key the attorney had handed her that morning, and wrapped her fingers around it. "For the first time," she said quietly, "I'm exactly where I chose to be." Without another word, she pushed open the squealing gate and stepped onto the land that everyone else had already given up on. Far behind her, the pickup disappeared down the dusty road. Ahead lay silence, hard work, countless unanswered questions, and a future no one else could imagine. The first sound Mara noticed was not the wind rustling through the dry weeds or the distant chatter of sparrows nesting beneath the old barn roof. It was the slow scrape of a hoof against weathered timber. She turned toward the paddock. A bay gelding stood quietly beneath the shade of a sprawling walnut tree, his dark coat dulled by months without proper care. A narrow white stripe stretched from between his ears to the bridge of his nose, making his solemn face seem almost thoughtful. One ear carried a small notch, the kind left by an old accident long forgotten. The horse neither approached nor fled, he simply watched. There was no fear in his eyes, only caution, the kind earned through disappointment. Mara rested her travel bag beside the sagging fence and leaned lightly against the top rail. She knew better than to rush toward an unfamiliar animal. Trust, whether between people or horses, had never responded well to impatience. For several quiet minutes they remained exactly where they were. The afternoon breeze stirred the tall grass. Somewhere beyond the orchard, a woodpecker tapped steadily against an old elm. Finally, the gelding lifted his head and walked forward. His movements were careful, almost measured, as though each step required a decision. When he reached the fence, he lowered his nose toward her open palm. She let him investigate at his own pace. His breath was warm. His whiskers brushed gently across her skin. Without thinking, she smiled for the first time in weeks. "You've been alone too, haven't you?" the horse answered with a soft puff of air. That evening, an elderly woman arrived carrying a wicker basket filled with fresh bread, eggs, and a small jar of blackberry preserves. "My name's Edith Lawson," she introduced herself. "I live over the next ridge." Mara invited her onto the porch, apologizing for the missing chairs. Edith laughed and settled comfortably on an upside-down wooden crate. Everyone wondered who would finally buy this place. Edith's eyes wandered toward the paddock. "I see you've already met Ranger, so that's his name." "It was." The older woman smiled faintly. "Arthur. Collins raised him from a foal. They worked these fields together for nearly 20 years. What happened? Arthur passed away last autumn." She paused before continuing. "His children lived hundreds of miles away. They weren't interested in farming. They sold the machinery, emptied the house, and listed the property. And the horse? They tried finding him another home." Edith sighed. "He's older now. Arthritis in one shoulder. Most buyers wanted younger animals. So they left him. They arranged for neighbors to keep an eye on him until someone bought the farm." Edith nodded toward several stacked hay bales beneath a nearby shelter. "We've all taken turns bringing feed whenever we could." Mara looked back toward Ranger. He had returned to grazing, though every few moments he glanced in her direction. He stayed because nobody wanted him. Edith's expression softened, or maybe because this place still needed someone who remembered it. The words lingered long after the older woman had gone home. That night the farmhouse felt enormous. Every loose floorboard announced her footsteps. The windows rattled whenever the wind shifted. Water dripped steadily from a cracked kitchen pipe into a dented metal bucket. It should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt honest. Nothing here pretended to be perfect. The roof leaked, the porch leaned, the wallpaper peeled away in curling strips. Everything that was broken admitted it openly. Lying beneath a patched quilt she had found folded inside an old cedar chest, Mara listened to the sounds surrounding the farmhouse. Crickets, owls, branches swaying. Then, sometime after midnight, came the faint, reassuring nicker from the paddock. Ranger was still there. Somehow that made the empty house seem less empty. Morning arrived, wrapped in pale golden light. Mara stepped outside before sunrise, carrying two Buckets, one filled with fresh water, the other with hay borrowed from the remaining supply in the barn. Ranger noticed her immediately. This time he didn't wait beneath the walnut tree. He walked halfway across the paddock before stopping. Not close enough to touch, but closer than yesterday. She smiled. That's progress. She filled the water trough, spread fresh hay, and checked the old fencing one section at a time. Several rails needed replacing. The gate hung crooked. Recognition, not friendship, not yet. Simply the quiet understanding between two souls who had both survived being left behind, and who, without speaking a single word, had decided to begin again. Mara lifted the latch on the paddock gate with one hand, while balancing a metal pail in the other. Fresh water rippled inside as she stepped carefully through the uneven entrance. A bundle of sweet hay rested beneath her arm, its earthy scent filling the cool morning. Air Ranger watched from beneath the walnut tree. He didn't hurry toward her. Age had taught him that nothing worth trusting arrived in a rush. She carried the bucket to the old stone trough and poured until clear water shimmered beneath the first rays of sunrise. Then she spread the hay across a dry patch of ground several yards away before quietly stepping back. The gelding waited. Another moment, his ears flicked toward her. Only, after deciding the strange woman meant no harm, did he wander forward. He lowered his head, inhaled deeply above the fresh water, and drank in slow, deliberate gulps. Every movement carried the quiet dignity of an animal that had survived long enough to value patience over urgency. When he finished, he crossed to the hay and began eating. Mara folded her arms against the fence and simply watched. It wasn't happiness, she felt. It was something steadier. For the first time since leaving her old life behind, she had solved a problem that stayed solved. At least for today, that was enough. The farmhouse demanded attention from dawn until dusk. Each room revealed another forgotten repair. Loose shingles allowed thin ribbons of sunlight to pierce the attic. Rainwater had stained sections of the ceiling a deep amber color. Several floorboards shifted underfoot, announcing every step with tired creaks that echoed through empty rooms. One kitchen cabinet hung from a single hinge, while cracked plaster exposed rough stone beneath the walls. Mara carried a small notebook everywhere she went, every broken window, every missing nail, every leaking pipe. She wrote each task carefully beneath as the growing list looked impossible. Instead of worrying about everything, she chose one repair each day: a tightened hinge, a patched screen, a clean chimney. By sunset, the house always stood in slightly better condition than it had that morning. That became her only measure of success. The fourth morning she entered the paddock instead of remaining outside the fence. Ranger lifted his head. Immediately, he stepped backward once, not from fear, simply surprise. She stopped walking. Silence settled between them. A breeze carried the scent of wild clover across the field. Neither moved. After several long moments, the horse relaxed. Lowering his head again, Mara smiled faintly. "Your choice," she whispered. When she finally approached, she ran her hand gently along his shoulder. His coat felt rough beneath her fingers, but healthier already than when she had first arrived. The stiffness in his movements remained, though he no longer seemed quite so weary. Near the rear fence, she discovered an old feed chest protected beneath a small wooden shelter. Inside lay a few sacks of grain someone had recently left behind. Later that afternoon, an elderly neighbor named Ben Harper stopped by driving a faded blue tractor. "I figured you'd find those," he said with a grin. "You left them?" He nodded. "Arthur helped everyone around here at one time or another. Seemed wrong to leave his horse hungry." Mara thanked him. Ben simply tipped his hat. Folks around these parts don't keep score. Over the following week, life quietly settled into a rhythm. A flock of free-ranging ducks emerged from the reeds surrounding the pond every morning, waddling confidently across the yard as though they had never accepted anyone else's ownership. They quacked impatiently. Whenever breakfast arrived late, Mara scattered cracked corn beside the water's edge. Within days, the ducks began laying eggs beneath blackberry bushes, inside abandoned barrels, and once, surprisingly, inside an old wheelbarrow leaning beside the barn. Each discovery felt like a small reward from the land itself. One rainy afternoon, while clearing debris from the loft above the stable, Mara uncovered an old sea chest buried beneath dusty blankets and broken harnesses. She expected rusted tools. Instead, she found carefully folded maps, weather journals, seed records, and dozens of handwritten notes tied neatly with faded blue ribbon. Must you are belonged to Arthur Collins. He had recorded nearly everything he observed. The first frost, the arrival of migrating birds, which apple trees bloomed earliest, how rainfall changed, the creek each season. One page, written in darker ink than the others, caught her attention. The eastern meadow always surprises people. They say the soil is poor because they never wait long enough. Give it patience and it gives back twice what you planted. She reread the sentence several times. Then she walked outside despite the drizzle. Standing beneath the porch roof, she looked toward the eastern meadow stretching beyond a line of maple trees. Until that moment, she had only seen neglected grass. Now, she wondered what lay waiting beneath it. A few days later, she met Lily. The girl couldn't have been older than 12. She arrived pushing an old bicycle whose chain squeaked loudly with every rotation. Freckles covered her nose, and her auburn hair escaped from beneath a faded baseball cap. She stopped at the gate without speaking. Mara waved first. "Can I help you?" "My granddad wanted to know if you needed anything." "And who might your granddad be?" "Ben Harper." Mara smiled immediately. "Then tell him I've already accepted one favor." Lily shrugged. "He says neighbors aren't favors." She looked around the property with obvious curiosity. "Know how to collect eggs, fix chicken wire, and plant tomatoes. That's quite a list. My grandmother says useful people are never lonely." The words made Mara laugh. She invited Lily inside for lunch. The girl returned the next afternoon, carrying homemade biscuits wrapped in a clean kitchen towel. Soon she became a familiar part of each week. Together they repaired fences, painted porch railings, and cleared years of tangled weeds from the garden. One evening, while brushing Ranger beneath the setting sun, Lily spoke quietly. "You know why he answers to that name?" Mara shook her head. "When he was young, everyone said he could outrun a summer storm." She scratched the horse gently behind one ear. "But Granddad says strength isn't what made him special. What did? He always found his way home." Mara looked into Ranger's calm, thoughtful eyes. Perhaps she realized that was exactly what both of them had been trying to do all along. Not return to the place they had left, but discover where home could begin again. One cool afternoon, while Emma scrubbed an old wooden feed bin beside the stable, Noah wandered over carrying a basket of apples his grandmother had sent. The 12-year-old had become a familiar face around the farm, always appearing with a question, a story, or a willingness to help. Ranger stood quietly beyond the fence, lazily pulling mouthfuls of grass from the pasture. "My granddad says he wasn't always this slow," Noah said, tossing a small stick into the weeds. "He used to lead every team during harvest." Emma glanced toward the horse. "Really?" The boy nodded eagerly. "When Mr. Collins was younger, people borrowed Ranger for everything, pulling wagons, bringing supplies through the snow, even finding lost calves after storms. Granddad says the horse knew every trail better than the people did. What changed? Time." It was a simple answer, but it carried surprising weight. His joints got stiff. The tractors replaced the wagons. Folks stopped asking for him. After Mr. Collins passed away, there wasn't much for him to do anymore. Noah rested both arms on the fence. "I think he misses having a job." Emma looked across the pasture. The old gelding wasn't weak because he lacked strength. He had simply been forgotten. Once the world decided it no longer needed what he could offer. The thought stayed with her long after Noah left. She recognized it all too well. There were people who measured value only by usefulness, who admired others while they solved problems and quietly overlooked them once they no longer fit someone's plans. She had lived inside that kind of thinking for years. Standing there beneath the fading afternoon light, she promised herself that nothing living on this farm would ever be treated as disposable again. Several days later, Emma carried Arthur Collins' weather journals toward the northern edge of the property. Lily walked beside her, swinging a small shovel over one shoulder. According to one of Arthur's notes, the richest soil lay beyond a grove of old maple trees where the land dipped gently toward a narrow stream. The two of them pushed through shoulder-high weeds until the ground opened into a forgotten meadow. Emma immediately noticed the difference. The soil was darker. Moisture lingered beneath the surface despite weeks without rain. Wildflowers grew thicker there than anywhere else on the farm, and butterflies drifted lazily from blossom to blossom. She knelt and scooped up a handful of earth, crumbled softly between her fingers. Healthy, living, exactly the kind of ground that rewarded patience. "I think this is it," she whispered. Lily smiled. "So where do we start?" Emma looked across the clearing. "Right here." The rest of the afternoon disappeared beneath steady work. They pulled stubborn weeds, removed loose stones, marked planting rows with twine, and turned the soil until both of them were covered in dust. By sunset, only a small corner of the meadow had been prepared, yet somehow it already felt different. Not abandoned anymore. Chosen. Emma traded several dozen duck eggs at the village market for packets of vegetable seeds. She returned with tomatoes, beans, pumpkins, herbs, and sunflower seeds tucked carefully inside her backpack. She watered each row using buckets drawn from the old stone well behind the farmhouse. The water emerged cold and crystal clear. Arthur had once written that the well had never failed, even during the driest summers. Emma hoped he was right. Each morning she walked to the garden before beginning any other chore. Nothing appeared. Still, she returned the next day, and the next. Patience, she reminded herself, was part of planting. Lily sometimes found her kneeling quietly beside the empty rows. Neither felt the need to fill the silence. Hope often grew best without conversation. One bright morning, Emma opened Ranger's paddock and clipped a lead rope gently onto his halter. "Come on," she said, "I've got somewhere new to show you." The horse followed at his own comfortable pace. Together they crossed the meadow until they reached a broad hillside carpeted with fresh grass. Emma removed the rope. Ranger remained still. He seemed almost uncertain that the open pasture truly belonged to him. After several long moments, he lowered his head and began grazing, slowly, at first. Then with growing confidence, Emma settled beneath the shade of an old oak tree and watched him explore. The breeze carried the scent of wild mint through the valley. Birdsong echoed from the nearby woods for nearly an hour. She did absolutely nothing. Oddly enough, it became the most productive hour of her entire week. Sometimes healing required work. Sometimes it simply required allowing something wounded enough room to breathe. Friday morning brought another unexpected visitor. A silver pickup stopped outside the gate. An older woman climbed out carrying a woven basket, covered by a checked towel. "My name's Helen. Brooks," she called warmly. "I figured neighbors should introduce themselves eventually." Emma welcomed her onto the porch. Inside the basket were homemade rolls, strawberry jam, and a wedge of fresh cheese. Helen accepted a cup of tea and looked around the farmhouse with an approving smile. "You've already done more here than anyone expected. I'm just getting started." "I can see that." After a pause, Helen added, "When your garden begins producing, my family buys vegetables every week. We'd rather buy from a neighbor than the supermarket." Emma laughed. "I'll have vegetables before I have customers." "Good," Helen smiled. "That gives both of us something to look forward to." Before leaving, she handed Emma a folded piece of paper. "My phone number. You don't even know." "I know enough." She looked around the property one last time. Anyone willing to save an old farm deserves at least one person cheering them. Harsh. That evening, Emma returned to Arthur's journals. One entry caught her attention immediately. "Never fight the creek. Guide it, protect it, respect it. Flowing water feeds the valley. Standing water only feeds mosquitoes." She read the sentence twice. Then she studied the hand-drawn map beside it. Arthur had carefully sketched a narrow spring winding through the eastern meadow before joining the creek below. The spring still existed. She had crossed it several times without realizing its importance. Closing the journal, she walked onto the porch. Moonlight shimmered across the distant meadow. She couldn't explain why, but she suddenly understood something. The spring wasn't merely water. It was the quiet heartbeat of the entire farm. Whatever future this place held would begin there. Nearly 2 weeks after planting, Emma noticed a tiny splash of green breaking through the soil. She froze. It was only a single bean sprout, no taller than her little finger, yet it stood proudly against the morning light. Lily arrived, moments later carrying a watering can. "What are you looking at?" Emma simply pointed. The girl grinned. "It worked." Neither of them spoke. Again for several minutes, one sprout became 5. 5 became 20. Soon neat green rows stretched across the little garden. The pumpkins unfurled broad leaves that shaded the ground. The tomatoes climbed steadily up their wooden stakes. Sunflowers reached eagerly toward the sky as though racing one another to greet the sun. Every evening, Emma carried water from the old well, making trip after trip until every plant had enough. The work left her shoulders sore and her hands blistered. But unlike the life she had left behind, every drop of effort she poured into this land came back in visible ways. The garden was no longer just growing vegetables. It was quietly teaching her a truth she had almost forgotten. Given enough care, enough patience, and the chance to put down new roots, even a life that once seemed abandoned could flourish again.